Hello, welcome to another Sonic Lab special presentation. I'm here with Andy from Source Distribution. If you remember, we had the Eventide H9 in the office for a little while, which is this little baby here. A small but very powerful pedal. You might remember I put a few synths through it and everybody went, wow, it sounds amazing. I didn't get the opportunity to review it, but Andy is here to kind of show us what's what. So what is what?
So what it is the H9 is essentially a collection of the factor pedals which were released around about 2007. So the factor pedals...
So the mod factor, the time
exactly.
factor, black hole, was it black hole? Space.
The space,
right.
And the pitch factor. So the idea with those pedals was they would give you, the time factor for example was a huge collection of digital delays, tape delays, basically every delay under the sun that you can imagine. But a fairly sizable footprint for the pedal board. So if you wanted modulation and delay, you were taking up a fair chunk of real estate on your board.
Yeah.
Idea with the H9 is it's able to host any of those factor algorithms, plus any number of new algorithms that Eventide choose to bring out. So in this case, the H9 Max includes every algorithm from the factor series, plus a few others that are H9 specific.
Right, so it's essentially got all the DSP that those pedals had.
Yep. That's
sort of generic enough to be able to host all of those algorithms. Right, okay. But it's got some other cool things as well. I didn't get the chance to hook it up, but it's got a Bluetooth connection, so you can actually edit.
It has. I mean, one of the issues any Eventide owner will be aware of over the years was that if you took the time to invest in an Eventide product, you were in for a couple of weeks of sitting with the manual and really tweaking the unit to kind of get to grips with the menu structure, the way that the presets would be laid out, or how to kind of deep edit the device. With the addition of an iOS editor, you've got the ability to dive in straight away. So the learning curve is, well, there isn't really one. Everything's very obvious and everything's right in front
Well,
of
first things first, I mean, we've heard what it can sound like on this, well, what shimmer can sound like on a synth, which is that massive pitch shift reverb. I mean, what kind of stuff have you picked out?
I mean, I use the H9 for in a number of different settings. So I do a lot of function work, a lot of session work. So it's really a bit of a Swiss Army knife. So whatever the customer, the client needs, that's my kind of blank canvas to try and produce it. So I kind of generally have loaded into this unit a good standard chorus. So those kind of chorus sounds were really the preserve of rack mount units traditionally, so kind of into the 80s and into the 90s.
Right.
If you wanted that kind of detail in a
classic Strat,
exactly, in a modulated sound, you would have to invest in a large rack mount unit, and it would be difficult to cart around. There'd be extra MIDI controllers, etc.
We should just say we're running this in mono at the moment, so it's going just directly into your Mesa Boogie setup, and back. Is it via effects loop or via?
It is, right, yeah. Okay. So it's kind of dry guitar straight into the front end of the amp, and then we've got an effects loop which is taking care of the processing from the Eventide.
Right.
You could run it in a mono to stereo setup. You could run it stereo in, stereo out. So depending on what your rig is, it will play nice with whatever setup you want to use. In addition to the chorus, we can go through and have a look at a univibe kind of sound.
Such a unique sound, isn't it? It really is.
I mean, there isn't a specific univibe algorithm in there, but you've got the ability to tweak the phases, for example. So if you were to go into a specific algorithm,
it's on the iPad, right?
On the iPad.
So we've got a representation of the mod factor, which was what the pedal was.
Exactly. So we've got the ability to go in there. So with an algorithm, if we think of that as a single pedal. So from the phaser algorithm,
that's the mod factor.
Yeah. Exactly. So we've got a representation of the mod factor as it would have existed in kind of real form. What we can also do within each of these algorithms, for example, the phaser, is we've got a number of different phaser options. So we've got positive, we've got different kind of a feedback phaser, a biphase. So we can actually change the character of the phaser, so it's not just one generic sound. Yeah. So you're able to sculpt, if you're aware of kind of how an effect is made in the real world, there's a good chance you can get a close approximation.
So you get all of the depth that you would with the pedal.
Exactly.
But, right, okay, but in a smaller footprint.
Yep.
So let's have another couple of seconds. I mean, it does great delays. I mean, there's an awful lot of stuff.
So, if we've got access to tremolos, And again, that can be edited straight from the app. So we can change the type of tremolo. We could have a bias trem, which is a slightly softer attack, or we can kind of go to an opto, which is kind of more of that kind of Fender vibe.
And this is connecting over Bluetooth using the editor. And
It is.
So can we access all of this stuff via the actual front panel of the unit as well? Because obviously we might not be in a situation.
Absolutely. So kind of if we were using this at a gig or a rehearsal and we want to tweak a sound quickly, looking from the pedal, it's quite a clean interface. So from the outset, you think, well, I can't really get deep into it. I need to use the app. But from the top panel, the way that it's designed is you've got an X, Y, and a Z function, which gives you access to the most relevant parameters,
for that
if you like.
particular patch,
Exactly.
right.
So if it was a delay, the Y would generally be the overall mix level. So if you wanted to have an appropriate mix level for a particular venue, if it's quite reverberant, you might want to dry that up a bit. If we want to go deeper into the pedal, we can hold this parameter here and go into an expert mode, which then allows us to
go through all of the individual.
Everything, exactly.
And the XYZs, can you assign those yourself from within? So if you design your own patch and you think I need these parameters.
Absolutely. So if you've got a parameter that you absolutely have to have access to on the top layer, then you can assign these. They can be absolutely anything. They could be interchangeable.
Right.
And then the light ring becomes your encoder. So if we look at the edge parameter there, we can change it
Yes,
on the pedal, and it changes in real time. So really, really easy to to tweak on the fly. Once you've made your tweaks, you go to your presets, hold down preset, and then hold again, and we can save it. So
how many presets have we got in?
space for 99.
Right, okay.
But you can also shrink down the amount of available presets. So if you've got a performance where you know you're only going to use 9 sounds, you can then have presets 1 to 9. So if you want
well, that takes me on to another thing, because I mean, obviously this is designed to kind of work, certainly in a live situation, as a small footprint in your pedal board.
Yep.
You can send MIDI program changes or just have assigned foot switches to kind of cycle through those.
Absolutely. There's a couple of ways in which we can control the unit. So we've got MIDI in, MIDI out on the side. So if we wanted to chain it to a MIDI foot controller to access any of the parameters can be tied to MIDI.
Right.
Also for program changes. We've also got an auxiliary switch on the back, which can be used for bank up, bank down functions.
Right, so you get access to it.
Exactly, tap tempo, all that kind of deep stuff to expand the pedal to make it.
And can you take an incoming program change and send it back out to the rest of the rig and map it and all those things?
Absolutely. So say for example you had a couple of MIDI enabled pedals and you wanted to change a program on the H9, which also changed a delay and a reverb in.
So it can be at the centre of your rig quite easily, right?
Exactly, yeah. So it's
anyway, more sounds. Let's have something else.
Okie dokie. So we were talking about reverbs earlier. So if I click onto the algorithms, in the H9 Max we've got access to all the time factor algorithms, mod factor, pitch factor space, and some that are unique to the H9. So if I go into a digital delay, again, we've got a graphical representation of the factor pedal. And then you can just kind of scroll through. So there's a combination of factory presets, but also you can kind of create user presets. So if I click on that, I've got a really, a pristine delay. So we've got something like...
And can you use the tap tempo on the side to...
Exactly, so we could either do that from the app, or if we press and hold, go into the effect itself, and then we can tap tempo from there.
Right.
So we've got...
Right. So and these are very sort of pedal specific. I mean, are there any things that can combine aspects of the different pedals to create sort of super patches?
Absolutely. So in its kind of basic state, a lot of the algorithms will host one effect, if you like.
Right.
And you can launch one or host one effect at a time. As you get into some of the more progressive pedals, like the pitch factor and the space, you'll find...
they had combinations.
There's combos in there, exactly. So if we look at the plate reverb or the spring reverb, we've got access to a tremolo in there. So if we kill the intensity, all we've got is the reverb.
Right.
Yeah, so there's some algorithms with other effects that are piggybacked onto the back end.
And of course, the reverbs are something certainly in the synth world that really you could just get in, Cocteau Twins, off you go, really, isn't it? It's
absolutely. I mean, it's so appropriate for synth guys, but for guitarists that are playing in a band where there isn't a synth player, you can then expand your horizon sonically in terms of what you can provide. So if we went to something like, if we go through the pedal and have a look at one of the shimmer effects, which was made famous by The Edge. Let's have a look. So we've got a lot of these big ethereal sounds which traditionally were only the preserve of a keyboard player or synth player. So you can create these incredibly lush pads.
Anything sounds good in that patch.
Exactly. So great for intros.
Not that your playing isn't brilliant, of course. Yeah.
But these get you out of jail for a lot of things.
Yeah.
In a studio context, if you're looking for intros or middle eights, there's a lot of these algorithms where you just hit a single note and something.
And I did hear some octaviders and harmonisation and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So with the pitch factor, there was a number of. I mean, if we go back through Eventide's history, a lot of what they were about were kind of pitch effects, the harmonizers, so in terms of stereo width and also in kind of manipulation of pitch. So all of those presets are available. If we look through the pedal, what have we got? We've got a lot of great octaves that track. If you want kind of more of a synthy vibe, we can go.
That's it. Some filtering going on in there.
Exactly. So again, we've got pitch shifting, we've got filtering. So
what sort of just if I stop you there, what sort of parameters have we got access to of what's going on there?
Within that preset, we've got access to the mix, so we could have fully synthesized sound, and then we can kind of add in the original dry guitar.
Okay, so this is the enveloping that's going on.
So we can change the envelope.
It's like a touch bar, effectively, but with a. And is the front panel it, or can we go even deeper than that into the sort of parameters of?
Pretty much the parameters are kind of essentially the main controls that we've got access to. Right. If we go into the XY pad, though, we've got a whole new set of parameters that we can access. So we can tie to the XY pad any of the parameters that are available within the preset. So we could access the filters, we could access the resonance, the envelope. We could assign it to the gyroscope that's built into the iPad, so we can control it on the move. Exactly. We can.
It'd be great if you strap the iPad to your guitar.
Well,
maybe.
This is it. You're starting to get into Matt Bellamy territory.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's a hell of a lot that you can access from the iOS devices.
Just to clarify, this is available iOS. It's not Android, but iOS and desktop as well.
Desktop, so you can go Mac or PC.
Right. Okay.
And the editor's available there. So what the editor is amazing for is the ability to organise presets and organise sounds.
Right.
So here I've got a couple of different libraries, if you like. And if I want to go into edit any of those, I can go into edit list. And then from there, I can then just drag and drop.
Which is going to be really useful. You're in production rehearsals for a band, you set it all up, and then,
Exactly. It saves so much time. So if you're working, like say, production rehearsals or working with multiple artists, you can have your sets all archived, and then you can just mix and match
quickly
to whatever
whip
you
it
want
in
to
there
use.
and then just screw it down there.
Exactly.
Right.
And then from there, you can save it or not. And then you can choose to save to pedal. So we can transfer those to the pedal, and you see in real time that it all loads in there. So depending on how many presets we've got, kind of 20 or 30 seconds, everything's there. You get a handshake on both ends to make sure it's done.
You've got it.
And then off you go.
Nice. I noticed at the beginning you were talking about the Macs. One of the things that I did find quite confusing is there are sort of various different stratas and layers of the number of algorithms that are available to you. And these are payable upgrades and bundles and what have you, right?
So as it stands with the H9 Max, that gives you absolutely everything. So all the factor algorithms plus anything that Eventide release in the future for the platform. There's a H9 standard which gives you access to 14 algorithms, Essentially everything that you need to get on your way. So a handful of delays, handful of modulation effects, some pitch, and obviously some reverbs. And then from that point, there's an online store, which
you got in-app
which is
purchases,
accessible.
right.
Yep. So you can kind of go into the store, go into H9, and then you can audition sounds. You can download them onto the pedal to try, and then you can buy them.
Right.
So each algorithm is around about £14.
Right. Okay. So
if you
very tempting.
If you equate that to the price of an octave pedal, for example, it's kind of, if you need a reverb, a delay, and some modulation, but you also need an octave sound or a great pitch shifter, £14, bang, you've got that within your pedal. There's also an additional device called the H9 Core, which basically ships as an empty unit.
Right.
So the thinking behind that is with a H9 Max and a H9 Core, you can port all of your existing algorithms to the second unit. That allows you to stack algorithms together. So if you wanted a reverb and a delay.
Okay, but you just put the ones you need in it, so it's actually cheaper. Oh, okay. So if you wanted two on your pedal board, you greedy sod.
That's the way I use it. I have my main unit, which does all the heavy lifting, all the major fairy dust,
right,
and then a separate core unit which looks after a spring reverb and then any delays that I need.
So I noticed there was a tease for a new algorithm which was more sort of overdrive, distortion, that sort of thing.
Yes.
I mean, are there any things that aren't time and pitch based at the moment, or is that a kind of new direction?
There's within, again, if you go into some of the pitch factor algorithms, there will be drive sounds, there will be fuzz sounds in there. The likes of the Arpeggiator, for example, there's an Arpeggiator built in there. So you've got a number of different avenues that you can go down that are not necessarily...
We better hear that.
So what we've got there, we've got kind of like a baritone going on with an Arpeggiator. Again. So loads and loads of scope just to kind of hit single notes, and then you can kind of go off on a tangent.
So with the pitch stuff and the scales and the harmonies, does it read what you're doing and kind of adjust to the scale, or do you have to tell it what scale you're in the first place?
You've got to be aware with a lot of them what scale you're working in.
Right.
So if we go to the Quadravox, for example, we've got a key of E, and then we can choose whether it's major, minor, diminished, whatever it may be. So if we go to that sound, and if I go out with the key, it doesn't quite like it.
Right. But that, I mean, I guess the thing is the idea of this is the preparation work that you would do before.
Exactly.
So perhaps if you're a complete freeform hippie and you want to play in some obscure scales and throw that, that might not be the algorithm you'd reach for.
Exactly. But I mean, kind of within there, you've got a number of modes in there. So in terms of Mixolydian, Locrian, so it does go quite deep, and you can get quite out there. Right. With some of the more traditional pitch shifting effects, they will just kind of play a second, a third, a fifth of the original root note. If you like.
So if you're Thin Lizzy cover band, you can.
Yeah, if you want to do any of that kind of stuff, it's all in there.
Right.
Especially for Queen covers as well.
Absolutely. Perfect. So in terms of the Max, there's another issue that is you basically get, because they're bringing out algorithms continuously, or not continuously, certainly at certain points. When you buy the Max, then you get that sort of in perpetuity, right?
Exactly, yeah. So kind of anything that Eventide dream up in the future will be available, and it's a case of a firmware update. One of the recent additions was a looper for the H9. So on the back end of the pedal, you've got access to a looper, which is again a new algorithm and just a firmware update. So again, you can go in, update that via Bluetooth, bring that down to the pedal, and it's 20 or 30 seconds to do.
So obviously we've been looking at guitars, but as I've discovered, it's great for all sorts of other things. I mean, how do you get it to integrate into the system? Presumably there are sort of settings you need to make.
There are. I mean, traditionally with the units of this type, you'd have to hold 3 buttons and kind of go into a secret system mode to kind of access the gain structure of the front end and what the back end's doing. With this pedal, we can kind of access those functions very, very straightforward. You've got an input gain with level meters. So say if you wanted to feed the outputs of a DAW and you wanted to use this as a hardware device.
All right, like a send.
Exactly, so kind of a send and return. You can trim the front end to play nice with whatever level you want to send to it. If we wanted to feed it a synth or a bass even, because a lot of those pitch effects work incredibly well with bass guitars. So in this drop-down menu, we've got a source instrument. In this case, it's set up for guitar, but we could have bass, synth lead, synth bass.
And that affects the way that the input responds.
Exactly.
Right?
So
Okay.
kind of in terms of the amount of headroom that you may have. So if it's expecting a bass guitar, then it's just kind of going to give you a little bit more freedom of how hard that front end is being hit.
And I noticed you can set up the auxiliary switch and how that works as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in its standard mode, in terms of navigating the pedal, we can bank up, and then to bank down, we can press the hot knob, and then we can bank down.
So you could do that with your foot.
Exactly.
Easily, right.
The way I tend to use it is I have a non-latching foot switch connected to the auxiliary input, and then I can go into there and tie together what the expression pedal function's doing, whether I'm using an aux switch, and then from that point I can tie that to, say, the bank down function.
Right.
It could be a tab tempo, or it could be used to access the tuner on and off.
Right, and as the auxiliary, if I'm right, the auxiliary switch is a multi-pole, so you can have two switches. Is it two
You
or
could
three?
have three.
Three switches.
So
on
if you've got a 3-button foot switch, you could tie that to the looper functions, for example. So
Right.
that could be the transport controls for looping. So you can expand the layout of this pedal quite easily.
Right. And it plays nice on the desktop anyway. I mean, because you can access it via MIDI. And I suppose if you were running it via MIDI from a DAW as well, you've got MIDI controllers and all of that mapping stuff.
Yeah. So if you wanted to have program changes in real time,
I imagine it's a very addictive experience, right?
it is. If you spend some time with it, hours can disappear.
Well,
quite quickly.
perhaps you could just give us a couple more patches to play
Yeah,
us out, and then
absolutely.
we can sail off into the sunset. Beautiful. So chorus and delay, yeah?
Yeah, so you got access to a lot of the sounds that were originally in the H3000, which was a huge
Big
success.
studio rack. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So during the 80s with a lot of guitarists like Steve Vai, Steve Lukather, Frank Zappa, they started to access those sounds. So you've got those kind of big, dreamy, wide choruses. So it doesn't have to be anything as full on as a chorus. It could just be subtle pitch shifting, D-tune left, D-tune right, where you get this real expansive.
Yeah, because if you're using it with a stereo rig, you really...
Exactly. So what it will also allow you to do is, so you could have your guitar left and right split out, and then you can detune it by a couple of cents either side. So you could pitch the left side down, the right side up. So you're getting
Classic
access.
Eventide H.
Exactly. So kind of all those 910 sounds, all those H3000 sounds. So again, 15, 20 years ago, the preserve of studio guys, you would never be able to access these kind of sounds at home or on the desktop.
Andy, thank you very much. It's been a
Thank you very
pleasure.
much for your time. Cheers.
Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.